awaits us today.
A hotel at 3 a.m. is one of the strangest environments a person can work in. Not because of what's happening, because of what isn't. The lobby is lit, but empty. The hallways are lit, but silent. Somewhere above you, behind hundreds of identical doors, people are sleeping. Strangers whose names you have in a system, whose credit cards you've charged, whose presence you've verified. You know they're there. You've never seen most of their faces. And sometimes in the deep hours of the night, the line between who is registered and who is actually there becomes less clear than it should be. A front desk clerk named Kevin worked the overnight shift at a mid-size hotel in the Pacific Northwest for nearly 4 years. He had a reputation among his colleagues for being unflappable, the kind of person who handled difficult guests, medical emergencies, and noise complaints with equal composure. He did not frighten easily. He's still not sure what to call what happened during his second year on the job. It began with a guest in room 212. The guest had checked in 2 days earlier under the name Robert Gaines. Standard reservation, 2 nights, single occupancy, business rate. He had paid in cash, which was unusual but not prohibited. He had been quiet. Housekeeping reported no requests, no do not disturb sign, room neat and barely used each morning. On the second night, Kevin's shift began at 11 p.m. At 12:30 a.m., the elevator opened and a man walked to the front desk. Middle-aged gray hair, dressed for travel. Coat, small rolling suitcase. He said he was checking out. Kevin pulled up the reservation. Robert Gaines, room 212. He processed the checkout, printed the receipt, thanked the man, and watched him walk out the front door and disappear into the parking lot. He flagged room 212 as checked out in the system and moved on. At 2:15 a.m., the phone at the front desk rang. It was an internal call from room 212. Kevin stared at the display for a moment. He answered. A man's voice, calm, unhurried. He said he needed an extra blanket sent up. Kevin said, "I'm sorry, sir, I show room 212 as checked out." The man said, "No, I'm still here." Kevin asked for the name on the reservation. The man said, "Robert Gaines." Kevin asked him to hold. He pulled up the system. Room 212 showed a completed checkout at 12:31 a.m. No active reservation. No current guest. He called his supervisor, who was asleep in the back office. The supervisor came out, looked at the screen, and said, "Room's empty, don't worry about it, probably a glitch in the line routing." Kevin went back to the desk. He picked up the phone. The hold line was still open. He said, "Sir, our records show the room has been vacated. I'm going to need to verify what the man said. I haven't gone anywhere." His voice was perfectly calm. No irritation, no confusion. Just a statement of fact. Kevin asked the supervisor to go up and check the room. The supervisor, grumbling, took the master key and went up. He was back in 4 minutes. He said the room was empty, bed unused, no luggage, no personal items, no sign that anyone had been there recently. Kevin looked at the phone. The hold light was still lit. He picked up the receiver. The line was dead. He checked the call log. The internal call from room 212 at 2:15 a.m. was logged. Duration, 4 minutes, 17 seconds. He checked the room entry log, the electronic record of every keycard swipe. The last entry to room 212 had been housekeeping at 10:14 a.m. Nothing after that. not the guest at check-in, not Kevin's supervisor just now. The door log showed the room had not been opened since housekeeping. Kevin has no explanation for who checked out at 12:30 a.m. He watched the man walk to the elevator, cross the lobby, and leave through the front door. He spoke to him. He printed a receipt with that man's name on it. He has no explanation for the call at 2:15 a.m. from a room the door log says was empty, on a line the system says was active for 4 minutes and 17 seconds. He worked at that hotel for 2 more years after that night. Room 212 was always the last room he assigned. He always found a reason to give guests a different number. He never worked a shift again where he didn't check the room entry log before he answered an internal call. Just to know. Just to make sure the person calling was actually there. Hotel security cameras are running all the time. Every hallway, every elevator, every stairwell. The footage is stored automatically, reviewed only when something happens that requires it. A theft, a complaint, an incident. Most of the time, it captures nothing more interesting than guests shuffling to the ice machine at midnight and housekeeping carts, moving methodically down corridors. Most of the time, a night clerk named Sandra worked at a historic hotel, one of those properties built in the early 20th century that had been renovated multiple times but retained its original bones. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, corridors that ran longer than seemed possible from the outside. The kind of building that felt, particularly at night, as if it had a memory. Sandra was not someone who dealt in vague feelings. She was practical. She liked the overnight shift for its predictability. Fewer guests, fewer requests, more time to work on the administrative tasks that piled up during busy days. She had worked there for 3 years before the night she started watching the third floor camera. It was a slow Thursday in November. Sandra was at the desk, working through invoices, when she happened to glance at the monitor bank behind her. The hotel had 8 cameras displayed in a grid. Lobby, 2 elevators, 4 hallway cameras, and the parking entrance. She glanced at them periodically out of habit. The third floor hallway camera showed a woman. She was walking slowly down the corridor away from the camera. White nightgown, dark hair, barefoot, moving with the slow, directionless gait of someone not going anywhere in particular. Sandra watched for a moment. Late night wanderer, not uncommon. Guests who couldn't sleep or who were disoriented sometimes appeared in the hallways at odd hours. She reached for the intercom to have a staff member check on her. Then she stopped. The woman had reached the end of the corridor. She should have turned, either toward the elevator or toward the stairwell. Instead, she stopped. She stood at the end of the hall for approximately 20 seconds. Then she turned around and walked back the way she had come. She walked all the way to the other end, stopped again, stood, turned, walked back. Sandra watched this for 11 minutes. The woman walked the length of the third floor corridor and back, continuously, without variation, without entering any room, without pressing any elevator button. Back and forth, like something automated. Sandra called the third floor on the internal line. No answer from any room. She called the staff member who was doing rounds. She asked him to check the third floor hallway. He said he was on his way. She kept watching the monitor. The woman stopped in the middle of the corridor. She stood there for almost a full minute. Then she turned and looked directly at the camera. Sandra felt the specific quality of cold that is not about temperature. The woman's face was not clear on the monitor. The resolution was standard definition, the distance too great for detail. But she was looking at the camera, directly at it, standing perfectly still. Then the staff member appeared at the far end of the hallway on the monitor, coming around the corner from the stairwell. He was looking down at his phone. He walked the length of the corridor. He walked right past where the woman was standing. He did not look up. He walked the entire length of the hall and came back on his radio. "Third floor is clear. Nobody up here." Sandra looked at the monitor. The staff member was still on camera, standing at the far end of the corridor, looking around. The woman in the white nightgown was gone. Sandra told the staff member to stay where he was and keep looking. She ran the camera back 30 seconds. Watched the staff member walk past the spot where the woman had been standing. He had not walked around her. He had not paused. He had walked directly through the space she had occupied. She checked the room entry logs for the third floor for the entire night. Every room that had opened before 11 p.m. Nothing after that. No door had opened in the third floor corridor at any point during the 45 minutes she had been watching. The woman had walked that corridor for 11 continuous minutes, entered no room, been bypassed by a staff member who could not see her, and then disappeared. Sandra pulled the footage and kept a copy. She no longer works at that hotel. She says she left for unrelated reasons, and which may be true. She has shown the footage to 3 people. 2 of them said nothing. One of them, who had worked in that building a decade earlier, looked at it for a long time. Then she said, "Third floor, yeah. We used to hear things up there, too." She would not say more than that. She handed the phone back, picked up her coffee, and changed the subject. The way people do when they've decided some things are better, left exactly where they are. The night audit is the quietest part of a hotel clerk's shift. It happens between 2 and 4 in the morning, depending on the property. You close out the day's accounts, reconcile the room charges, verify the guest list against the actual occupied rooms. It's tedious, methodical work, exactly the kind that suits the deep middle of the night, when the brain is running low and the building around you is as quiet as it gets. Most audits are uneventful. A wrong rate here, a missed charge there. The kind of discrepancies that get fixed in 60 seconds and forgotten by morning. But sometimes, in the middle of a routine audit, you find something in the system that shouldn't be there. A night auditor named Phil had worked at a family-owned hotel in rural Vermont for 6 years. He had done thousands of night audits. He could run one in his sleep, which he said he sometimes nearly did. On a Monday night in early March, he sat down to run the audit at 2 a.m., pulled up the guest list, 13 occupied rooms. He went through them one by one, matching names to room charges, verifying checkout dates. He got to room 8. The name on the reservation was Edward Halloway. Phil stopped. He knew that name, not from a previous stay, from that morning's local newspaper, which he'd read during his dinner break. Edward Halloway had been the subject of an obituary, a retired school teacher. He had died 4 days earlier on Thursday of a heart attack. He was 71 years old. Phil sat very still for a moment. Then he told himself there were other people named Edward Halloway. It was not an unusual name. Coincidences happened. He pulled up the reservation details. The reservation had been made online. Standard booking. 1 night, single occupancy. check-in had been recorded at 11:47 p.m., just before his shift began. Payment had been processed on a credit card. He pulled the last 4 digits and the card type. He wrote them down. He verified that room 8's key card had been activated at 11:49 p.m. He called the room to do the standard courtesy check. Was everything satisfactory? Did the guest need anything? No answer. He knocked physically on the door of room 8 at 2:20 a.m. Nothing. He used the master key and opened the door. The room was immaculate. Bed turned down by housekeeping, untouched. No luggage, no personal items. The Do Not Disturb placard was not on the door. The room was exactly as housekeeping had left it. Phil went back to the desk. He looked up Edward Halloway's obituary on his phone. The man in the photograph was a face he had never seen before. Older gentleman, kind eyes, smiling in what looked like a school photograph. He looked at the credit card information on the reservation. Then he called the credit card's customer service line. He explained that he was verifying a charge from their property and needed to confirm the card was not flagged for misuse. The representative told him the card had been reported as part of an estate, that the holder had recently been deceased, and that the estate executor had been notified that the card should not be in active use. The card had not been used since the holder's death, except for the charge at Phil's hotel at 11:47 p.m. that night. Phil asked the representative to confirm the date of the last transaction before that one, 3 weeks earlier. A grocery store. Nothing between that grocery store charge and the hotel booking 4 days after the man's death. Phil sat at the front desk for the rest of his shift and did not go near room 8. In the morning, when the day shift manager arrived, Phil showed him the reservation and explained what he'd found. The manager called the estate executor, who confirmed that no family member had made any booking using Edward's card or information. The executor was quiet for a moment and then said something that Phil has never forgotten. He said, "Edward came to this town every March for 30 years. He always stayed at your hotel. Room 8, if he could get it. He said it was his favorite room because it had the view of the mountains." He paused. "He died on a Thursday. He had a reservation booked here for the following Monday. He'd made it in February. I canceled it when I was going through his accounts." Phil asked when he had canceled it. The executor checked his records. He had canceled the reservation on Friday, 1 day after Edward died, 3 days before it appeared back in the system. Phil has no explanation for how a canceled reservation reappeared in the hotel's booking system under a dead man's name, charged to a card that had not been used since before his death. He has no explanation for the activated key card, for the recorded check-in at 11:47 p.m. What he does have is a memory of standing in the doorway of room 8 at 2:20 in the morning, looking at an untouched bed and a window that faced the mountains, and feeling very clearly that he had interrupted something. Not a break-in, not a glitch. Something quieter than both of those. Something that had simply come back one last time to the room it had always loved, and found it exactly as it had always been.